Okay, sorry about that. Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to recap an event that we recently held at the Mill of Kintail. So on December 16th of 2023, we held our annual Kintail Country Christmas. So for those who aren't familiar, it's a Christmas-themed or holiday-themed event that's held at the Mill of Kintail, where we dress up the property and have various themed activities for the day. So it took a break over COVID, and then it was revived last year, where we had approximately between 150 and 200 people. So we decided this year we were going to make a real attempt to grow the event. So this year we increased the amount of foot traffic through the site to almost 1,200 people, which puts us on par, if not a little ahead of what we would have put through for the 50th anniversary, that was a great news story there. We had 135 vehicles that pre-bought online. So we went to an online platform this year to be able to purchase tickets. So they were able to save $5 by purchasing online ahead of time. And then it was 15 online, and then we had 240 vehicles that paid $20 day of. We also increased our social media interactions. So we had around 1,500 people that responded positively towards the 50th anniversary event. For this, we were upwards of 2,100. So we're starting to get more traction there. And eventually the event helped to raise roughly $3,000 in net revenue for this year. So we had extended hours with more activities than in previous years. So we ran a noon to 8 programming cycle for this one. So the event can't happen without a huge workload from our staff and volunteers, especially for the day of. So as you can see, we have some of our staff that are pictured up there that were able to help the day of, which was a long day for a lot of us staff to be able to facilitate the event. So parking was definitely a main concern, as it was for the 50th anniversary, and it went off without a hitch. The crew managing the parking did a great job. We had no incidents when it came to either people getting close to or getting into actual accidents, which was a main concern coming from my side. And there were a multitude of options and activities for families. Just a caveat, as we go through some of the photos, there was a conflict with our professional photographer that day. So these are staff photos as they're taken with us running through the site, and as much as we had to do that day. So we had some annual favorites. You can see the cookie decorating station. We had s'mores at the campfire. We had the Pioneer Lifestyle demonstration with Chad Clifford. We had children's crafts, and we had stories read by the fire. And then we had photos with Santa that you can see in the middle there. So for a $5 donation, you were able to get a printed photo of your interaction with Santa. So those are a lot of the favorites that kind of got rolled over. These are some of the new additions that we brought in. So we had a horse-drawn carriage ride. That was our shuttle service from the parking lot up top down to where most of the activities were happening. That was a huge hit. We had the scouts that put on a demonstration. You can see it for winter camping on the right-hand side. And then we brought in our buddy Spartacat, who kind of helped kick off the Santa photos. So a similar situation there. You were able to book ahead of time and get your photo taken with Sparty. We also had choirs singing carols in the museum. So sorry, Paul, it wasn't me. We actually had professionals in singing, which has probably kept people from being driven away. Also, a major focus that we had this year, and it was a lot of work from the operations crew, is we decorated the site and lit it up once it got dark. And unfortunately, these photos don't really do it justice. The site looked amazing. We had some laser lights that don't show up here, but again, they worked tirelessly to be able to decorate the site. And it was really something special. Something apparently we really haven't done in years, is run it into the nighttime, but it was really cool to see. So again, this is just a part of the handout that we had. Again, it was designed similar to what we had for the 50th anniversary, that gives you a lay of the land of everything that was going on that day. And again, this was the backside of the layout with the map, again, that had everything going on. So then we just got into some lessons and takeaways. So we've kind of completed a debrief from the event, and so we've talked about certain aspects of it. So for me, one of the major things that we learned out of this is staff have grown leaps and bounds from running the 50th anniversary. So there are a lot of people that were first involved in running events for the 50th anniversary, and we took what we learned there, and we've kind of learned from that, and we put it in place for this event, and really the event went off without a hitch. Staff did a great job planning. So for those who haven't been involved in events take a ton of work. So the one issue we get into is our regular jobs don't stop because of the event. So the people that were able to dedicate their time to the committee and heading up the event, their regular job isn't on hold. So they went above and beyond their regular calling to be able to make sure that this event went off without a hitch. So in terms of the work involved, we had regular meetings leading up to it, which came out with duties and to-do lists for everybody. The operations crew was a huge help in setting up the space. We would go there at night to test the lights and see where we had issues, and then we'd have to come back the next night to fix them because it's hard to fix lights in the daytime. So there was a big time commitment for a lot of the staff involved, and as we alluded to before too, this event is also very reliant on volunteers, and we had a good group of volunteers that came out the day of and put in a long day with us. So it was much appreciated from the event side of things to be able to pull that off. Excuse me. We are approaching what the site can handle on the size of the event. So based on when people come and go, at any one time for this event here, it was pretty jammed down in the area where everything was going on. Similarly for the parking lot, there's only a certain amount of space that lot can handle. And again, with people coming in and going, we were okay for space, but anything more than what was coming through, and we would be running the risk of probably taking on too much based on what that lot can handle. We are at the mercy of the weather, and this one we pulled it off barely. I don't know if everybody remember, but the week leading up, we had a bit of a thaw, and it froze overnight, and we tested the lot on the Thursday before, and it was good enough to go, and we kind of stuck our best foot forward and said we would make a go of it, and luckily the weather held out. But the reality is, if we get snow the night before, or if it rains, or if it is really tough to have a backup plan, because without that parking lot, we can't facilitate the amount of people through the site that would have been coming. So it really puts the event at risk. And then overall, I think we just really need to look at whether we should be in running events or not. Again, so this is quite taxing on the staff. And to me, there are 3 different ways you can run events. So you can run the event yourself like we do now, in which case, if it's going to be a fundraiser, you're able to then keep the funds that you raised. You can bring in an event or a promotions company to help you with the event, in which it'll cut into the amount of funds that are actually raised out of the event, or we would not run the event at all. So at this point, I think we as staff still want to see the event continue. We think it's a great community event. It was very well received. We had great feedback. But we're just at this point, we're looking at how we can better use our time to make sure that it's not so taxing on us as staff to be able to put on a good event like this. So with that, I'll take any questions or any comments you may have.
Yeah, so this looks like it was a lot of fun, and you're actually touching on a point that I was wondering, and I'm sure it was fun. Like it looked like it was a lot of fun, but it comes down to the return on investment, right? Because you really only netted $3K, so then it comes down to what's the purpose of the event. If the purpose of the event is primarily to be a fundraiser, is it worth all that effort? But if the purpose of the event, priority is to connect to the community and connect people to the community, then holding the event is worth it, and making the money is secondary. So what do you see the purpose being, and is it worth it? Thank you.
No, I do. I think you've touched on both points of the event there, and personally, I think the touch point with the community is probably our number one focus when it comes to this event. Like there are a lot of activities and stuff for the smaller kids. And there are a lot of, it brings a lot of people out to the site, and I'll bet you're passing half the people that have never been out there before. And now they're coming back. And I think that was part and parcel of the work that we put in for the 50th is now leading to a better event for Kintail Country Christmas. So the secondary side of that is the budget side. And I think we're starting to prove that we can run really good events. So good events, it will then bring good events coming. The next event is just like that much better. So we can now, at this event, something I forgot to mention is, so we had a food truck out, we had food provided, which is something we haven't done in the past. But now we can go to these people and say, hey, we had 1,200 people at our event last year. And the next thing you know, you get more food trucks coming out, and then you could look at potential sponsorship to be able to, to increase the amount of net revenue that you're going to net out of the event, which would be probably the next focus. So if we're going to grow the event and make it worthwhile from a financial standpoint, that's probably the next step. But in my mind, I think it's a great community event, and I think it brings out a lot of people to the site that wouldn't ever really be there without it.
And one other related question, you netted 3K. What was the total brought in? Yeah, what was the total that you actually, the revenue you took in, and then you had expenses, and then you ended up with 3K. So what was the revenue total?
I'd have to go back. I can look at the full budget. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers again. I just remember that we netted approximately 3K out of it.
From the direct sales, it was about 7 to 8K, and we also had a couple thousand in donations, contributions to help cover some stuff. So.
Bev?
Thank you. It was a great event. I wasn't able to go, but I certainly heard from a lot of people, and I think it does increase our area in the community, that people know that the Mill of Kintail is a destination. One of my questions though is around, I had a couple calls about fireworks. Did you just go ahead and have fireworks?
We did. So it was something, again, so we tried to come to the table with an idea that, would be another crowd catching idea. So when looking at having the fireworks there, we did look at other conservation areas and other conservation authorities, and we did find that some of them were involved in that sort of thing. We picked the quietest ones that were possible. So they scaled from level 1 to level 5, and they were all level 1s. So they're the quietest ones possible. And we did, at least personally, I found like we did get some, a little bit of feedback on, the possibility of having fireworks there. But I found that we got more calls about what time the fireworks were than why are you doing the fireworks? So I think in the end, it was more the visual aspect than it was the noise. I think, and I can understand if we were lighting off level 5s, that might be a little different, but they were residential fireworks. They weren't commercial. It wasn't like the one they have over the Ottawa River there, where it's a massive event and it's a huge noise concern. So they were small residential fireworks.
Okay.
Thanks. Did you gather any data on where the people came from? Were they all from Mississippi Mills, or how far flung?
No, so we have some of the data that would have been captured through the online sales prior to. And I think I ran into people that I knew at the event, and I know they weren't Mississippi Mills residents. Some of them are Ottawa, some of them are Canada, some of them were coming from the other side of Perth. So we're getting people coming from all over, which again, I think that's the purpose of the event, hopefully, is to drive more traffic through there of people outside of Mississippi Mills. So I think we got a pretty wide variety of people.
So anybody else have any comments? Okay, I just want to say, Andrew, it looks like staff did an awesome job. So thank you. Okay, something that's going to be very interesting to talk about right now is the watershed outlook, given what we're seeing outside. So take it away, Jennifer.
Good afternoon. So we saw a dry fall and a late start to winter, leaving lower than normal flows across the watershed going into January. After several large snowfalls and a couple of rain events, flows and levels were able to increase to close to normal conditions. So we're pretty much there. We are adding more water every day, so that increase is continuing, and we'll probably be at normal levels within the next week. We were able to fill Crotch Lake, which we were having concerns about in December, with the help of the January rain/melt. We are now drawing that lake down in order to have full storage capacity for spring runoff. This in turn will provide the lower portion of the Mississippi River with normal flows probably for the next 2 months. So as of February 1st, which was our last snow measurements, snow conditions across the watershed are sitting just above normal. These numbers are not as high amounts as we saw in 2019 and 2023, but are very similar to what we saw in 2020. Our next measurement will be taken later this week on the 15th. So we'll have a better idea of what we see. I'm expecting that the snowpack to have diminished a little bit due to the rain and warm temps from last week. But there is snow in the forecast for the next couple of weeks, so we'll see what we get. The snow we received in January was followed up by rain and warm temps in the first few weeks. This left most of the snowpack very dense. The density of the snowpack is similar to what we saw last year. So it'll be interesting to see if this is going to become a normalized trend that we see every year with this rain/melt happening throughout the winter, causing our snow to be more higher density. Historically, at this time of year, we are seeing a density around 20%. So this year, our numbers are between 30 and 40%. So not as high as last year. Last year, I think we were sitting around 40 to 50% density at this time of, but definitely higher than what we would normally see. And I'm going to assume that given last week's rain, we're seeing a higher density now. So we might be encroaching into that 50%. And given that 50% is considered ripe snow, so it's just at that cusp of letting that water go, which is usually what we see end of May, is the 50%. So given what numbers we're seeing, this kind of indicates to us that we could see an early freshet. If we see any significant rain or high degree weather. So this snow is just at that cusp that if we see any more water or melt into the snow, it could release at any point during the month of March, which would be deemed early because our normal peak would happen beginning of April. There's also, we could also see the snow can also sublimate and evaporate or infiltrate, which before reaching the river, depending on weather conditions. So if we get that kind of drawn out, not too hot, but not cold weather, and we get that kind of between 5 to 10 degree weather, the snow could sublimate and then we wouldn't see any runoff from it. For this reason, rain and air temperature will be the deciding factor in this year's freshet. So it all depends on well, it'll all depend on what kind of, if rain, if we do see any, and what kind of air temperature we see in March and April. The long-range forecast for the MNRF forecast is indicating normal temps and a slightly wet spring. They are predicting March to be of a normal precip, and while April to be a wetter than normal. So it is still too early to be confident in making a long-range spring prediction. Anything can happen in the next month and a half. There is still some snow in the current forecast, so we'll wait and see what we actually get. If we get a couple more large snow events, we could be dealing, it would probably just be keeping us into the kind of average range. But if we see more than that, we could be going up. For some reason it went off. We will be continuing to monitoring conditions very closely and issuing messages when needed. If we start seeing significant melt or ice breakup, then we would be issuing messages on ice safety or high water. And we should be sending out our updated flood preparedness manual in the next few weeks. So make sure you guys review it, and that's everything. Any questions?
Any questions for Jen or comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Jennifer, for that update. It's good to know that things are somewhat normal. Okay. Moving on to item 4, we have the general manager's update as to what's going on in the world.
Jen, would you just mind enlarging the Zoom screen so the chair can see any hands raised? Thank you. Okay, couple of things. One thing that I didn't manage to include, which is a good news item, and that is that I've been liaising over the past several months with a group called the Danby Foundation. It's a private family foundation. And just recently, they confirmed that they are going to donate $50,000 a year for 3 years to help us implement our wetland restoration and enhancement program through our stewardship program. So it's not a signed and sealed agreement, but they've signed off on the performance measures. And so really pleased to report back to you that we were successful in that. Some of the other things I wanted to highlight to you. We did, as directed, go out into the, meet with all of your planning groups over the past month. Matt presented on the draft offsetting policies that were reviewed here in December. And you'll see there the kind of questions that they were asking. They're interested in knowing whether or not the compensation would have to receive board approval. And it would really depend on the scale and significance of the compensation package. The reality is we do agreements with municipalities and developers today, you know, of a minor nature. So it's going to be scale dependent. How will projects be monitored post-construction? Those will be determined on a case-by-case basis and form part of the agreement that we'd be signing with the developer. So it would have to be determined on a case-by-case basis. Will MVCA's review of an offsetting proposal address municipal review requirements? This was really important, obviously, to your planners. And the answer is each of you have your own unique policies associated with your official plans and any other sorts of policy documents you might have. So planners can't assume that our review for the purpose of establishing an offsetting plan is going to necessarily cover all the things that they need to be looking at as the municipal planners. Our focus is obviously going to be on the compensation package and the ecological values. And then lastly, they were curious to know about how any monetary compensation would be administered. So we hadn't actually discussed this around this table, but I can tell you that the last time and only time to my knowledge that anybody provided financial offsetting or compensation to this organization, and it was through a hearing, a court case, it was administered through the foundation. So in other words, at arm's length to the authority. And I think by doing that, it helped to give that, well, as I said, arm's length administration of funds being given over that gave those people giving over those funds the comfort and knowledge that they would be administered in accordance with the court direction or agreement. So those were the four key themes that came up. Matt presented and attended all of these meetings. So if there's any follow-up questions, I encourage you to reach out to Matt on that. Another item I wanted to highlight is that you'll recall before the holidays, you appointed members to our new Museum Advisory Committee, and they met. And I think we had a very successful first meeting. Everybody attended. There was lots of interest. We had an election of a co-chair. And I think everybody's very motivated and interested in making it a success. So that was a real win. In terms of staffing, in the report here, I mentioned that we had made offers to a geotechnical engineer and a CET, and I'm pleased to report back that both of them accepted. So next month and in April, those two people will be joining the organization. And so really pleased to have that. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight was that at its foundation meeting in January, the foundation board did approve transfers to the authority to support, and you'll see on page 19 of your agenda, $15,000 to help with our legal fees. We are anticipating higher than average legal fees this year because of the number and significance of infractions that we've seen. So those will help to pay our legal fees to protect those wetlands. The review of the education program, and on that, I have a consultant's proposal in my inbox, so I'm hoping to move forward with that very shortly. And then lastly, to complete the next stage of the rehabilitation of the Purdon Boardwalk. So I'd say those were the highlights I wanted to raise to you, and happy to answer any questions about any of the other items in the report.
Any questions for Sally? No, everybody's comfortable. The one thing about the offset policy, that is in response if the minister issues an order, correct?
So the if the minister issues MZO or the community, I forget the full name of it, housing accelerating order or whatever it's called, there are two of them, then definitely these compensation offsetting policies would take effect. They may also take effect if one of your municipalities are approving something in an area where we would need to implement offsetting. And that's already happening. It's just we want to ensure that the parameters around those offsetting are very, very clear. So it has, it's fully transparent to all the parties, the circumstances and what's being asked is reasonable and fair.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Okay, seeing no other questions, 2023 work plan update. Sally.
Okay. So what I'm showing on the slides is in your board package. What I wanted to highlight and focus on today is that for those of you who were around the board table back in 2021, we passed a strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, we identified 27 actions or key projects that would indicate success of us making progress against the goals and objectives in the strategic plan. And what this is showing to you here are the progress we made in 2023 against the projects listed in this corporate strategic plan. So you can see on the far right, things that are completed or works in progress or deferred. So the status of them. Everyone in the middle column there that's highlighted in blue are things we completed this year. So we made a lot of progress in 2023, either wrapping up things we had started earlier or taking on new projects. So I would say that a lot of these things, I'm feeling very comfortable that as an organization, the goals and objectives we set out to achieve in 2021, we are making excellent progress against. That we're definitely on track for these various items. And the ones that are works in progress, most of them will be completed this year. I'll just highlight for you the ones that are deferred or at risk. So we spoke previously when I updated the board about the Carp Subwatershed Plan update. This is a project that we tried to initiate, but the city at the end of the day determined it was not in, didn't have the capacity to lead and to manage, and it felt it needed to. So so it has been deferred until the city is ready to lead that project. The open data plan, this is, you know, as you can see to the left, demonstrate at MVCA to be a trusted client-centered resource. Does that say resourceful? I believe it does, and helpful partner. So, you know, we get lots of data requests, and ideally we would like to make you know, a significant amount of our data open for use. But admittedly, with the challenges we've had in other fronts, it has been deferred, and so it is at risk. This strategic plan expires next year, so there is still an opportunity for us to do it, but I'm just being candid that it is not a priority of the organization right now amongst this list of 27. The Indigenous Engagement Plan, we have made several attempts and are currently working very hard on the Kashwakamach EA to engage with First Nations on that project. And we have had uptake on that project in a way that we didn't see on the watershed plan. So I do feel that we're making progress. And one of the things we're looking to implement is a quarterly update to the Indigenous communities that have expressed interest on the full range of projects that we're working on, such that now that we have their attention, as it were, to try to keep their attention and keep them aware of and engaged, not only on the Kashwakamach project, but on others as they arise. And I'll be speaking to that a bit later. Here Project 21 is the governance review of our foundation. So one of our objectives was to rejuvenate the MVCF into a highly functional and effective fundraising organization. That has been a challenge to implement. It's for several reasons, but I would say that where we're at right now with the foundation is we're pivoting to more of a focus on other foundations, in that fundraising as an activity is can be undertaken any number of ways. And up until this year, I would say we were focused on fundraising, letter writing, or, you know, smaller campaigns. Given the limited resources that we have, I think the foundation, at the recommendation of staff, is going to be looking for those larger type of donations like what we just achieved through the Danby Foundation, where the amount of time invested to obtain the funds is leveraging greater dollars. than what you can do. As Scott said, you can put a whole lot of effort into an event and raise $3,000 net, right? So we just need to be very smart given the limited resources available to run the foundation, to where we put the effort. That said, I think it still needs to have a hard look at how the organization runs, but that's for the foundation, obviously, to lead and champion. Just coming down the pipe for 2023, we made great progress in terms of job evaluations and wage reviews and the like. There are a few more that we'll be bringing back to you later this spring to wrap that exercise up for this first round. So all said and done, I think we've been making excellent progress. And I just wanted to point out, though, I think every item on this page has this little asterisk, meaning these are things that never go away. They're things that you always have to pay attention to going forward. We did them this term, but they will always be there. So I'll just stop sharing that and happy to answer any questions people may have.
Questions, comment? Janet?
This is on the Carp River floodplain mapping. You need to go to public consultation soon, and that was supposed to be in the fall. I know it got delayed. Do you have any time frame for that?
Yeah, so I think we're now looking at April. Is that correct, Beryl? Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, seeing none, thank you, Sally, and we'll allow you to continue right into the 2024 work plan.
Okay. So this one's going to take a little bit of time because I want to discuss with you some of the big projects we have coming down the pipe that are regulatory deliverables. When the province amended our legislation in 2019 and came out with regulations in 2020-21, it's frustrating as we found the process. A lot of the changes were not unreasonable. They are basically tasking CAs to do much of the heavy lifting that municipalities have had to do over the years that you've been tasked with. There's just been a 10-year delay, we'll say, for them targeting the CAs with this kind of work. So things like you'll see on the work plan here, midway down, we have the WECI asset management plan and the WECI operational plan. They just want to know that you can check the boxes that you are doing good asset management planning and that you have proper operation plans for your water and environment control structures. Those are not unreasonable things to ask of an organization. The first one in the list is the land inventory. Do you know what you own or have an interest in? Now, this one has turned out to be a very interesting question because the more I look into it, the more interesting it becomes. And I'll explain to you why. So on the surface of it, first of all, I think they were mainly focused when they wrote the legislation about our conservation areas. And you'll recall because one of the asks is you have to identify whether that land is developable. I think they were looking in the GTA area, looking at surplus lands or potentially other lands of conservation authorities and saying, what land do you own and can you free any of that up to deal with Ontario's housing crisis? But as a CA that operates numerous dams, well, you're also asking us to inventory what land we own or have an interest in around our dams. So if you think about where most of our dams are, lots of them are on Crown land because they cover water. And we never did acquire that land under the water. So that's number one. Number two, they often end on municipal shoreline allowances. Many of you, you own the shoreline allowance that we have our embankments on. Then a lot of them are also remote. We might have to go across Mr. Brown's farm to get to the control structure to, operate it. And truth be told, when you look at all the documents on file, it's a bit of a dog's breakfast in terms of the paperwork that says what we own, what we have rights to, et cetera. So we have the documentation, but let's just say it's not all clean and clear. We have the rights of historical usage to go on for a lot of this. A lot of these predate the CA. They're 100-year-old dams and structures and the like. But I think what the province in its legislation is asking us to do is to take a hard look at that and figure it out. And that's a potentially, I'm going to be very candid with you, a multi-year exercise for us to really try to sort that out. Because not all parcels are clearly identified. Not all of them are on the land registry, let alone the land titles office. So we're going to have to do that. That's a piece of work that we're going to have to do. We're not going to be able to do it by that deadline. I'm just letting you know. But the report that's going to come to you is going to say, we have a piece of work ahead of us, and we got to figure out how we're going to prioritize this to make it useful to us as we move forward. So if you think about Kashwakamak Lake Dam EA that we're currently in the midst of, we don't own, to the best of my knowledge, any of the land. Neither the dam, the embankments, the access to it. And yet we want to rebuild that structure. So I'm just trying to give you an appreciation for some of the things coming down the pipe that the land inventory will begin to identify. And then further down in the year, and you'll see these various orange items. It's because I'm going to be bundling these things together because they're all of the same theme. It's the land strategy that we need to deliver on and a watershed-based resource management strategy. And basically, those two documents are going to say what we want to do with our land and why, and what programs and services do we want to deliver and why and how, and who's going to pay for them. So these are significant strategic documents that are asking the CAs to say, to look, I'll start with the land strategy. And again, they called it a conservation area strategy, but for us, it's way more than conservation areas. It's, so I'm going to start with the dams. If you think about us identifying all the land that we have an interest in, it's not actually just the dam and the embankments and the access road. It's all the land we flood, because we flood other people's lands when we operate those dams, right? We both raise the water on their property and we lower the water on their property, and that's called flooding rights. So we need to think about that, not just now, but in the future, because if you think about in terms of the impacts of climate change, we know that the 1 in 100-year event is going to get bigger over time. What is currently the 1 in 100 is maybe the future 1 in 75 or the 1 in 50. I'm throwing out numbers. I don't know what it's going to be, but you know, it's these events that we're having to plan for are potentially, you know, greater in significance, right? Maybe shorter, but more intense, whatever the case may be. So at some point as an organization, when we are approaching to look at a dam and whether we, you know, it needs to be replaced, it's 100 years old, as we're doing with Kashwakamak, we want to replace it with something that's going to be sufficient for now or something sufficient for down the road. And that goes for all the dams throughout the system, including, you know, the Lanark Dam, the Widow Lake Dam, all the ones that we haven't gotten to yet that are on the long list for the next 10, 15 years, right? So we're going to be bringing forward to you reports that ask you to think about this. And we're going to start the process. So between January and April, we're gathering all the background information to give you current state. Here's what we know today. And then we're going to come forward in the latter part of spring and into the summer with discussion papers. And we're going to be presenting to you, here are the issues that we need to start to tackle going forward, both in terms of, you know, land ownership and prioritizing where we need to be putting our emphasis as an organization going forward. by the late summer, we need to be starting to put policy documents together that we can go out to the public to, because you'll see I have public consultation identified midway down there, consult, September, October. We have to consult with the public on the watershed-based resource management strategy. And that's the one that sort of sets out what are the policies and the programs and services we're going to deliver, what's our focus going to be, how are we going to tackle these things. And at the same time, the land strategy associated with that. So, so that's the pink through this. Okay, it's good. And I just, I'm giving you the heads up because these are not going to be easy discussions. They're going to be very ugly, not the discussions, but the issues. They're not easy issues to grapple with. And I'm not even suggesting that we'll be able to answer all the questions, but we'll have to map out by the end of the year in these documents our approach going forward, how we're going to tackle them, because we're not going to be able to answer and put a check mark beside all these things in the course of 1 year. But we sort of have to set a direction and strategy for how we're going to tackle it. And that's why at the end of the work plan here, I say, by the end of this year, we need to be updating our corporate strategic plan, because there's so much, you know, policy related type of matters that you're going to have to grapple with this year. The strategy, the corporate strategic plan was to be updated this year anyway to launch into next year. So I'm saying by this fall, we'll have enough information, have had enough conversations that we'll be able to begin to set, okay, what do we really want to focus on the next 5 years? Like, because there's what we know sitting here today, and then we're going to be finding out a bunch of other things, and we'll have to prioritize. So it's going to be, I think, a very interesting year from a policy perspective. So the PNP does meet ahead of a couple of these meetings to help, you know, round out some discussions and, you know, flesh them out a bit before we bring them to the board and then before we go to the public with them. So I just wanted to give you all the heads up of the kind of year we're going to have from a policy and issue perspective. These are all mandatory documents and they are all due by the end of the year. We have been working on several of them well before this. For instance, Euro started on the ice management strategy over a year ago with the development of an ice monitoring program. So they piloted it last year. They're piloting it again this year, and that will help to inform the strategy. We already had asset management plans and operation plans. So those will be largely packaging, you know, to make sure, checking the boxes that we've addressed everything that we're supposed to under the regulations. It's the land strategy and the watershed-based resource management strategy that are going to be the real tough ones, I think, that will really require a lot of discussion around the table here. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Andrew, and then Janet.
Thanks. This all sounds challenging, and I just wonder if the MVCA should be trying to kick some of this back upstairs. It's all very well to say you have to do this. Do it. Well, what are we going to do? Because with all the jurisdictional issues, it should not be up to MVCA to develop a policy on how to deal with that. This is stuff that some of it belongs to Justin Trudeau and some of it belongs to Doug Ford and some of it may belong to Mark Sutcliffe. It really, there needs to be a framework set in which all the conservation authorities can operate, because MVCA is not unique in this. MVCA has certain unique characteristics, but this is a much bigger issue than that. So I can see that it's quite legitimate to ask the MVCA to create the inventory, as you've been describing, of who owns this dam, who owns these abutments, who owns the roads that come into it, but then deciding on what a strategy is to deal with all of that. That can't be done on an atomized basis across the province. So what is the conservation authorities, whatever the acronym is, what are you doing here to engage with the government to say, you've given us an impossible mandate. You have to give us more clarity.
So, as of yet, not engaging with the government, engaging with fellow CAs. Interestingly, in the scheme of things, there aren't a whole lot of CAs that actually own and operate dams. So I've reached out to other large ones in Eastern Ontario, Quinte and Crow. And in fact, we're having a meeting on Friday to discuss these things because I've said, you know, to them, like, how are you approaching this task? Because the government, because they appear to have done this with the lens of conservation areas and not land ownership and all that implies for an organization like us, I don't know that they've really thought it through. I don't know that they know the Pandora's box that they've opened. They may, but I don't know that they actually do. So I'm going to be exploring this with some of the other CAs first to get their lowdown. I think when we get to the discussion paper stage, we may at that point, once we've sort of fleshed some of this out and sort of been able to define pieces of work or questions to be answered that are ultra vires, to your point, you know, it's just not our jurisdiction, man, especially since they removed our expropriation powers. Even if we wanted to increase reservoir capacity, do we even have the powers to do so? No, not necessarily. So you're right. I do envision any number of questions coming out of this that we may have to park and either seek legal counsel on, or to your point, kick up the ladder and say more direction needed because we don't know how to deal with this.
Yeah, I can just see this as being an enormous drain on the senior management resource, trying to figure out answers to questions that you haven't actually been asked or are not sure if you've been asked. So I would certainly, in my capacity as an occasional bureaucrat, say best thing to do is to delay, defer, kick it down the road.
So that's where I believe strategies are important. You know, your strategy is tackle what you can and what's of a priority to this organization, what we feel we have both the control and influence over to actually make progress on. And those other things will say, we acknowledge that this is an issue, but we're not prepared or, you know, have the whatever powers, resources, whatever the case may be, to move forward on that. And we just document it all. I mean, you asked us to prepare a strategy. Here is our strategy. And some of it, at the end of the day, we don't believe that we can deal with. We will be coming back to you on.
Janet?
Yeah, I had a very similar take as Andrew, and I was going to maybe be a bit more prescriptive, and maybe you're already doing this, but answer the mail, which is really spend most of the time on the conservation areas, which is what they're really interested in. And as you say, kind of punt the other stuff, knowing you have to do it. But I mean, clearly you can't do it within the time frame and just say, by the way, we have all these other things, which, I mean, you know, they're not going to put a house on a dam, so they don't really care about that, right? So, you know, spend the time answering the mail and then worry about the other stuff. And I also was, like Andrew was thinking, well, why is it our job to spend our funds on lawyers and land fees and everything else trying to sort this out? Like, anyway, that would be my comment.
Okay, I've got a complete aside here. I think it's interesting that you're starting to find out what you do own and don't own, because Scouts went through this about 10 years ago and they found out they owned a train station and a cemetery. And in Drummond, we actually own a cemetery too that's actually on our landfill site that nobody knew was there from the 1800s. So these things come up. But it is interesting when you say, okay, there's a dam there. We don't own the water, or we don't own the bed. We don't own anything. So I'm kind of saying, well, maybe you should give it back to Mr. Ford and say, it's Crown land, it's got to be a Crown dam. They gave it to you in the first place, right? It was an M&R transfer, so.
Yeah, well, I wish it was even that clear. It was the agricultural something or other. But in
Oh,
any
those
event,
people.
yeah, that is no longer an organization that exists, right? Because these things evolve over time, and apparently it was an arm or related to hydro. So, we're really going back in time for some of these things because, for instance, on the K&P Trail, there originally was land owned by individuals, presumably, after the Civil War and the like. So there were these land grants, and then somebody came in with a railway. So then it went to the railway. So Scott's going to speak to this a bit to you later on, but none of the properties, or not none, but very few of the properties we've come to own have very pure, nicely documented, clear title to in the land titles office. The only other thing I wanted to comment on is that, interestingly, when it comes to our conservation areas, what they're asking us to do, in part, is to consider what role CAs have in the greater matrix of parks, open space, conservation lands there are within our jurisdiction. So think MNRF, parks, Ontario Parks properties, your own parks, right? Municipal parks, MMLT and others who own conservation areas. So we are supposed to look at that matrix of who all owns land for parks and or conservation purposes, and what role do we want to have. And for all those properties we own today, what do we want them to be focused on? In terms of activities, like a lot of CAs, they're all about camping, recreation, boating. They look for all intents and purposes, to my eyes, like a provincial park. They offer many of the same amenities and the like. That's part of the discussion we'll have. Is there a role in our jurisdiction for us to do that? Does that make sense? I'm just throwing that out as an example.
Okay. Seeing nobody with any burning questions, we do have a motion for this, and it be it resolved that the Board of Directors approve the 2024 work plan as presented. Could I get a mover? Bev, seconded by Jeff. Okay, any discussion? Seeing no discussion, put it to a vote. All in favor? Vote is carried. Go ahead.
Thank you. It won't change the vote in any way. I just, I saw that in the 2024, so page 32, you talk about carp erosion control project. And I'm just wondering what that is, because I know there was one, many years ago in Glencairn. What is this one?
Euro, do you want to elaborate on that?
The carp erosion, that was the previous Class CA that we did with the city. It's a project that we manage on behalf of the city, and it was constructed. The project was still active because we went into 2 years of post-construction monitoring. So it's now complete. I will be closing officially the Class CA.
Right, so just for the counselors online, that's the one in Glencairn. Right, all right, thank you.
Okay, our next item is number 7. It's the appointment of the Public Advisory Committee Board Co-Chair, and Sally has a report for us.
So you may recall that John Crow was the co-chair of that committee, and when he retired and Alan Hubley replaced him, we needed to find a co-chair, and we asked around the table at our annual general meeting last year, and after he retired again. So I'm asking again because we are now actually scheduled to have a public advisory committee, and we would very much appreciate a co-chair from the board to sit on the committee. It's a good governance practice to have a board member sit on these public advisory committees. It raises their stature and their sense of understanding that they are, being heard, and that their voice matters. So I just encourage somebody, if there's somebody willing today to step forward, to sit in that position, that we could approve that today if somebody is feeling that they would like to do that.
I don't know what that was. I was hoping it was somebody saying they wanted to do it. Was that you? Oh, okay.
What's the time commitment expected to be?
3 meetings a year. And typically, and each meeting runs between 1 and 2 hours and a bit of prep ahead of time. And aside from that, I mean, it's co-chairing. So either the board member chairs the meeting or the citizen appointee. Okay. That'd be lovely.
All
for
right.
Judy.
Hook, line, and sinker, Jeff. And Mary Lou seconds. Okay. Be resolved that Dana Conley be appointed to serve as co-chair of the Mississippi River Watershed Public Advisory Committee. Jeff moved and Mary Lou seconded. All in favor before there's any discussion? Yay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have the 2024 budget report from Stacy.
Good afternoon. We're almost done with the 2024 budget process. It's gone out to all of the municipalities as required. There was either no questions or no feedback received. So we're at the point of getting ready to hopefully approve it today. How do I move to next slide? Oh, okay. Just as a refresh, this was their 2022 actuals, the 2023 budget, and the 2024. So it was about a 6.5% increase overall in the total budget. Most of that on our capital side. And this was the overall breakdown of revenues and expenses. If anyone had any questions, we got no requirement for changes, so it's as you saw it in December.
Okay, so most municipalities have had this now for probably about 2-3 months. And so you're a good barometer right here, even if you haven't passed your budget, if there's going to be anything kicked back. So not seeing any. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read the motion. Be resolved that the Board of Directors approve the 2024 budget as submitted. Moved by Roy, seconded by Janet. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none. Glenn, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Yeah, if I could just ask a question to staff. If there are any major areas of risk that we should be aware of as a board for this year's budget, any significant risk that we should be aware of?
So the immediate one that comes to mind would be the water and sewer connection from this building to the municipal water and sewer line out that window. We are still waiting on feedback from Carlton Place. They're in ongoing discussions with Kavanaugh Construction regarding cost sharing for the pump station and the shared infrastructure, other shared infrastructure. And the feedback I most recently had from their CAO last week is that they're still in those deliberations, and until those deliberations are completed, that they won't be in a position really to talk to us. I would ask if our board members know anything other than that. No. So that would be the key financial risk. I would say in terms of other risks, I'm just thinking through of interest just generally as part of our new audit, we're actually required to answer a survey, and it's very much risk-based. And I can't think of anything else when we went through the survey that was identified. And we're going to be reviewing that with the chair actually immediately after this meeting. So the questionnaire. So if something else comes up though, I'll make you aware, absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that question, Glenn. Okay, not seeing any other questions. I'll put it to a motion. All those in favor? It is carried. So moving on to item 9, which is K&P trail update and quit claims. Part of my former life.
So we do have some progress on the KMP side of things. So as recently as last week, we received a draft lease own agreement from the County of Lanark on behalf of all 3 counties. So the draft is still being reviewed on their side. We're doing the same thing on our side. We're also passing it through legal counsel to be reviewed there as well. So now accompanying this agreement was a list of titles along the KNP that require corrective action to properly confirm ownership of the entire section of the trail in land titles. Similarly to this process, so we are in talks with legal counsel to better understand what is needed from us as an approach to the various issues identified. So that is something that we're going to be working through. The more immediate issue is, so in December of 2023, we received notice from the estate of a landowner that had recognized a section of the trail that was incorrectly included in their lands back in 1995. So they have executed a quitclaim deed waiving their interest in the land in favor of us at MVCA. So in order to accept the land, MVCA would need to sign a land transfer tax affidavit, which would include a nominal value fee. And this property is identified in the list that came from the legal representation for Lanark County. So it would be something we'd be taking a step in the right direction and starting to tighten up some of those title issues.
Okay, any questions? Okay, I do have one question. Are we going to see a slew of these?
It is a possibility. It's something we're still working through in terms of an approach with our legal counsel, but it is a possibility we could start to see more from this side.
So I guess the question comes, should we have a more generic motion that allows you to proceed without bringing it back to the board all the time? And what would that wording be?
So as I mentioned earlier, not all of these have proper surveys associated with them. In this instance, that has a proper survey that we can register and clean up easily. So if you want to create a generic one, it doesn't mean we won't come back later, because some of these may have costs associated with it to properly register them in titles. And this is what we're trying to figure out tactically between ourselves and legal counsel and ourselves and the counties on how best to address this. There's a total, the legal counsel for the County of Lanark only examined title issues in Lanark and Frontenac. It did not look at any title issues in Renfrew. In total, I think there were 20 or 21 segments of the KNP that they identified as having some sort of issue with them. And thankfully, this coincidentally came in the door in December to do a quitclaim on one of those 20. But some of the other ones, the notations from the lawyer seems to indicate that additional survey work will be required.
Okay, so The resolution is resolved that the Board of Directors approve the signing of the land transfer tax affidavit in regards to the property identified by PIN 05001-0121-R in the county of Lanark. Do I have someone to move?
Paul, sorry, just before you get to
Okay.
the motion, I had one other question about this. Because this sounds as if it's going to be a two-step process for a number of properties, which sounds to me like an unnecessary encumbrance. If we know that this is all going to be transferred to the counties anyway, can we not put these in a parking lot and then just do all these quit deeds or whatever it else between the current owners and the eventual owners, rather than getting MVCA stuck in the middle and having to do all the conveyancing twice, all the fees twice, all the assignment of responsibilities to school boards twice, and things of this sort?
But where would the fun of bureaucracy be?
I have two comments. One, I believe this is part of the settling of estate. I think the applicant is motivated and looking for a timely resolution. That would be one comment. The other is that based upon a first blush reading of the lease to own agreement with that has been put forth by the County of Lanark, I do not see this as a short process. I think there'll be potentially, depending on what the final agreement looks like, a multi-year process. So if somebody's standing there with a quick claim and all I have to do is sign on a dotted line to resolve one of those 20, then my inclination is to seize the day, do it. And that's one I can check off the list, because the others may not be so straightforward.
There's green. Okay, could I get someone to move the motion that I stated before I forget what it was? Mary Lou, and seconded. Okay, over there with Helen. All those in favor? It is carried. K&P Trail, love it. Okay, 2024 fee schedule. Hi, Janet.
Could we make a request to the general manager that when more is known about these 20 or so properties, that you'll bring them before doing anything, and then we can have a discussion about what the proper way forward is and whether we want to spend the money and or have to or whatever. Is that?
Yeah, I assume it would come to the financial committee, would it not?
Yeah, the K&P Trail deal in its entirety is a big deal. It will absolutely be coming probably to finance and admin first, and then to the board.
Yeah, no, I'm just mean before you even do anything on those 20 properties.
Oh,
that
the
we
other
have.
ones? Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah,
there's no
that-
intent to proactively do anything until we figured out corporately, and I mean by this table, determining a course of action forward.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I want to make sure.
Okay. So item number 10, the 2024 fee schedule update.
If you'll recall, when we presented the 2024 fee schedule, we had left the education area as it was currently inactive. We are proceeding with running summer camps this year, so we just need to get approval on the fees that we're suggesting. We did some comparative of looking at other camps, and we had a budget that was part of the fees were actually calculated in the budget. So we're just looking for approval on the fees that we're looking at charging for the summer camps. We have the camp. The day is 9 to 4, which is fairly standard. We've got a 5-day and a 4-day in case we do run over a stat holiday. And we've put in place a discount for if they have more than one child in a session. And we've implemented a fee for before and after care. And we've also, we had discussed previously a group rate for self-guided tours any bus loads or whatever over 7 passengers, putting in a $3 per participant fee.
All right, questions on that? Okay, yes, Mary Lou.
I did a little bit of math and that does not cover the cost. Have you other forms of revenue to help cover the cost of running this?
In our budget, we do have summer student grants anticipated, but it is meant to be that it's covering the costs.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm going to read the motion. The motion is resolve that the Board of Directors approve A, the update to Schedule D of MVCA's 2024 fee schedule as set out in the report, and B, implementation of the cancellation policies as set out in the report. Do I have someone to move that? Okay, moved by Andrew, seconded by Dina. Any other discussion before we put it to a vote? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Okay, the next two items is the Venerable Mr. Matt Craig is going to be presenting. So the first one is the Mississippi Lake Safe Road Project, which is scaring the crap out of our township.
I'm just going to give a brief background on some of our safe access initiatives and some projects and history of safe access in the watershed. Safe access is essentially when we have a flood event, so the 1 to 100 year, and you have more than a foot or 30 centimeters of water on the road. And we have a history of safe access issues. West Carleton, Armitage, and Bayview Avenue, all of Mississippi Lake. There's several roads, which I'll discuss later. Lanark Village, Cedardale, up by Snow Road, and Joe's Lake. So we have a history and a record of road closures and safe access issues in these areas. So a bit of background, safe access just as an issue with our watershed. It's outlined in the provincial policy statement. Basically, that's more about land use development, but it does talk about people, safety, and vehicles. The technical document, which is very dated, that the province is responsible for is from 2002, and that really talks about vehicle access, depth of water, velocities, pedestrian safety. So it's quite a large document, and although it's dated, it's still very relevant. And then recently is 2019, Ontario's flooding strategy. There's lots of reference about public safety and flooding, emergency services, unstable road beds, and that was quite that was more focused on flooding and properties than safe access, but it does reference those issues. So just some milestones and dates relevant to the authority. In 1992, Bayview Avenue, which is the large circular road around Constance Bay, had a history of flooding, and the township at that time wasn't part of Ottawa. West Carleton approached the MVCA and had an agreement to raise the road. I have a copy of the agreement here I'll show in a minute. So obviously there was a need in the residents, and the municipality at the time knew that they had to do something about this issue. In 1998, the Clyde and the Mississippi rivers flooded significantly. We had the 1 to 350 roughly on the Clyde and the 1 to 100. Those events, as we mentioned today, climate change, we update our floodplain mapping with the results of those events. So it's important to realize that our mapping is constantly going to be changing. It's not static, and we use these events to do that. So recently, 2017, 19, 2017 was mostly the Ottawa River. 2019, we had road closures throughout the watershed. And in 2021, going back to West Carleton, although now it's the city of Ottawa, they actually published a feasibility report, and it talks about, we had a lot of input into that report, and it talked about the impacts to infrastructure, drainage, driveways. If you raise the road, it's impediment to people accessing the properties. And then you require a technical review. You can't just raise roads. It could create berms, storage capacity, push water onto other people's properties. And there's a permitting and notification process with this. And then most recently in 2024, Mississippi Lake Association has approached the authority. So these are just summaries of agreements. 92 agreement with West Carleton. And again, the most recent 30 years later, they're still dealing with these issues. People may wonder why after 30 years, we're going back to some of these areas. Well, the roadbed, we believe, is settled over the years. So even though they did raise it, it appears that it's settled, could be up to 20 centimeters. A little difficult to see, but this is Rosetta Road, and it floods periodically, more than the 1 to 100 year events, and it's always has issues. Private roads and laneways flood, which we don't have a lot of data, but we do have photographic evidence of some of these. And then, as many of you were on the board tour last year, this is Cedardale back in '98, which was impassable. So there's other issues about safe access, and one of these is a court case called the Gilmore case, and it's a landowner installed a driveway and started to build without a permit. It went to what we would have our regulations committee. It went to their executive committee. It went to the Mining and Lands Commissioner, who again decided their decision was in taking with the authority's decision, which was a denial. And then the landowner appealed it to divisional court, and divisional court overturned the decision. And so it was allowed. And then the authority, Wasaga, appealed to the Ontario Court of Appeal, and the decision was reversed again, and in favor of the authority's original decision. And then it was appealed to the Supreme Court, but it was not of national interest, so it was dismissed. But as a result of all that, and maybe some of you remember, we actually did not issue permits related to safe access for a year with recommendation from Conservation Ontario. And they did change the Conservation Authorities Act to be a little bit tighter around safe access and safety of people. So recent events with Mississippi Lake, as you may be aware, in 2021, we published and the board approved the watershed plan. And in that plan, there's reference to identifying flood-prone areas on Mississippi Lake. And the Lake Association certainly has been in contact with the authority. And then most recently in the past year, they asked the authority to explore and create maps about safe access around the lake. So we know that there's areas of inundation, and we worked with the Lake Association, and then we did our own field work and desktop analysis on identifying these areas. So this is an example in the right-hand side here. That's Montgomery Park Road. And you can see that the areas in red identify areas that are unsafe and would have over a foot of water on those roads during a flood event. And not only is meeting the minimum standards, we looked at the roads that could be flooded, and some of them have a meter or over a meter of water, which is a lot of water. So we've sent out some correspondence to municipalities, including the two pamphlets that are in correspondence that's attached to your board report. And we have a meeting set up with the Lake Association this week to talk about the results. So that's, in summary, pretty much everything. Gives you a background and some of the recent events.
Okay, questions for Matt? Okay, I only have one, and it's the next steps. I would like the municipal staff, when put ahead of the Lake Association, and perhaps request to be a delegate at whatever the local one is. Beckwith, it'll be, they have a different structure than we do, but ours will be the committee of the whole, and actually get the information to us before the Lake Association gets it. Or is it going out?
The only information that's gone out is what's in the board packages right now. So,
Okay.
and we have the letters to the municipality say, please contact us. We're available to discuss the results.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, we're not prepared to release the mapping at this point. And if
No, it has the roads in it though, based on the thing, which is going to cause
yeah,
consternation. I'm sure Reeve Kid will be questioning it for sure.
definitely we understand, but the Lake Association did ask for this,
Yeah.
and it was part of the lake watershed plan. But how that information is distributed is not yet decided.
Yeah, there's some political overtones here of why they were asking for the information too. So it's a convoluted web. Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, so Matt, you have the benefit of doing the next one too, which is the Section 28 permits, to tell us where you're at.
I don't have a presentation, but as expected, and as we, I don't have a crystal ball, and none of us do, but we did expect permits to stabilize, and they have. So we're just over 200 for the year. And if you look at the timeline report, our timelines are good. I think that's more about staff engaging with our applicants, and if we're missing information, the application goes on hold. So the timelines for someone to work through a project may not change, but it gives the applicants know that they need information that we need to process their application. So I think that's the most benefit of that process.
Okay, Andrew has a question.
Yes, thanks. I found the materials very interesting. I just wonder if it's possible to have those provided to us in something like a searchable format, such as Excel, so that we can look at what's going on in each of the townships and rapidly look it up. There's not a huge number from Tay Valley, but one in January, one in March, one in blah, blah. And it would be nice to be able to just rapidly search and see what sorts of things they are.
We can provide that upon request. I always leery of not putting something out that's publicly accessible, not in like PDF format. But if someone wants that-
Understood. This may come back to your data, the data item that was up earlier.
But I think that's if we could send that out to the board members if they want that, like by email.
Yeah, so yes, we want to try to make more of our information more accessible just generally. But this is not, I mean, this is a public document, so anybody can see this. But if we hand over Excel spreadsheets, you know, it can go on and on. So I don't have an issue with us responding to any requests, and we can, I just don't know how easy it is from our IMS system to create a CSV or VS.
It starts out as Excel, so it's
Oh,
very,
does
it's
it?
just not
Okay, good.
sorted. You can sort it to your heart's desire, I guess.
Okay, we'll see what we can do. Yeah.
Okay, it's now that fun time of the meeting. Is there anything else that anyone wants to bring forward? Okay, seeing none, could I get a motion for adjournment? Okay, we have Helen down there, seconded by Taylor. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Ray wanted to talk to Stacy. Just a reminder.
Thank
so
you
we'll-
and bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
What's that?